Hey everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
How you doing?
Good. I'm over here today.
You're there.
Welcome to my home. I'm Dr. Mark Hatala, and these are some of my outstanding students. And today we're going to talk about statistics, but let's start out with introductions.
Hi, I'm Maddy.
I'm Will. I'm Zach.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Annie.
Outstanding. Well, what we're going to talk about today, we're all exposed to statistics all the time. And can we believe them, or maybe do we question their validity? And so I asked everyone to kind of think up a statistic that they've been exposed to recently. So who would like to get started?
Well,
Please, Zach, go ahead.
so I just finished The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. And one of the chapters was about weather forecasting and how we've gotten much better at predicting it than we used to be. And he talks about the National Weather Service, right, the government agency that forecasts the weather. If they say there's a 10% chance it's going to rain, then over the long term, it rains 10% of the time on those days. Whereas if you look at weather.com, which is the site of the Weather Channel, they typically assign a much higher likelihood of raining than there actually is. Because people notice when you say that it won't rain, and it does. But they don't notice when you say it will rain, and it doesn't. So I thought that's a good example of...
No, that's outstanding. And the reason I like that too, I'm what the Weather Channel would label as someone who's weather involved, which means that I love the weather and checking it. And because as a scientist, why can't they predict the weather, you know? And so it seems to me that like AccuWeather and weather.com are always trying to push like ice storms and extreme weather conditions that never come to pass. So that's a very good example.
I just thought it was a good example of why you need to check your sources to look at what other reasons they might have for changing their predictions.
I believe Nate Silver runs 538.com.
Yes.
Too. Yeah, so he definitely knows of what he speaks. Who else would like to go? Or go next?
I can go.
Annie,
next.
please.
In terms of statistics, I pay a lot more attention to statistics that kind of like blow my mind in a way where I'm like, wow, I really didn't realize that at all, or I didn't know that. But in terms of like validity, like if I'm reading a statistic, I'm more likely to believe it than if somebody says it. Because I'm like, how accurate are you? Do you have your numbers right? Like, where's your credibility? That sort of thing. And then like, whenever I'm reading it, usually like they can like, I guess like kind of cite it, or it'll come from like a journal article or something. So it's a lot more believable. But this one came from my biology class PowerPoint. So I believe it a little more. Don't know how true it is, but it kind of blew my mind. So we're talking about like ecology and stuff, and we also talk about a lot of climate change. There's a lot of statistics on that, but we won't get into it. But you should do your research because it's real. But so one of the things that they said was of all the birds on Earth, 70% are like chickens and other poultry, and only 30% are wild.
Delicious.
And then of all the mammals on Earth, is 60% are like livestock, and 36 are human, and and 4% are wild. So I believe the first one a lot more than the second one, but it still like blows my mind. And I'm like, I like try to conceptualize it, and then like it makes sense when we think about how much food we eat, like how much chicken and like livestock and stuff. It's like it makes sense, but it's also like, really? Like that's a lot.
It is. Well, the thing that makes me question it is, have you heard this? It's anti-cat propaganda, where they say how many birds that cats kill every year. Like it's billions of birds.
Yeah.
And so it would seem like there's a lot of birds out there that aren't chickens.
Yeah, but we also eat a lot of chicken, and you've seen those like pictures of like the chickens and like their little farm, and they're so compact. And
Which came first, do you believe, the chicken or the egg?
the egg.
What?
Well, evolutionary theory would dictate the egg, yeah.
Because
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
As we've said before,
But I don't think that would have been conceptualized as a chicken.
Zach and I are vegetarians, and so therefore we are morally superior to people who do. No, very good.
I
and
only eat chicken.
Only eat chicken. Okay. I can give a statistic too. So I talk about this in really all my classes because I find it utterly fascinating. They do survey research, and they ask people, you would say that you've had sex when you've completed this activity. And I won't get into, I don't want to get red banned on this video, and so I won't go into the very, the nefarious things that people do. But one of the questions, or one of the answers, is French kissing. And so it's 1.4% of men and 2.9% of women say that they have had sex if they French kissed. And so I think that is... It is, that's, yeah, in a class of 30 students, that means one of my students thinks that they've had sex if they French kiss somebody. I'm trying to think of ways you could get pregnant from having, from French kissing somebody, but,
Now, if you did not know how sex worked or how pregnancy worked,
Sure.
I have definitely talked to middle schoolers, like, because I'm a future teacher, who don't understand things. And definitely think that that is how pregnancy happens.
and then
like,
this is the problem of abstinence education. This was 18 and over, so I agree. If it was middle school students, that would be amazing. This is adults that
like,
they...
someone kissed, am I pregnant? I'm like, no.
Yeah, and so that's my statistic of that, like, stretches credulity. I agree, but yeah. Who'd like to go next?
Well, I have
Ashley, please.
another environmental statistic. So, like I said, I'm a future teacher, and one of my final projects, because we're in finals week, was to make a unit plan, and I tied in.
Can you tell us what a unit plan is? Is that like a teaching thing?
Yeah, so
Obviously,
a unit plan, so you have like your daily lessons, and then the unit is like, so for an English teacher, I picked it to like go over one book, you know, and then all the lessons that you would do tied into that. So yeah, so one of the lessons, because I picked a sci-fi book about like a future where like the environment was very different. So I tied in a lesson about connections from the environment in the book and what it was commenting on about our environment today, and helping them to like figure out drawing their own connections. So anywho, I tied in an article from an exhibit in the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. And I feel like that's a very reputable source, right?
Yeah.
But in the exhibit, it was the first time when I was doing my research that I realized that apparently we are in the 6th massive period of extinction, like right now. And the reason why it's not super talked about is because there are still a lot of species that are like alive but endangered. But according to the article, which was like made for kids, and so like it's a little simplified, they said that 98% of life on Earth was going extinct. You know? And I was like, that is not true. There's no way.
It's a scare statistic, really.
Really. But I also think that, like, as a person, I don't trust anything that happens on the internet. Like, if it's on the internet, I'm like, I need at least 3 to 4 sources, and at least 2 of them need to be very reputable before I will believe anything. So I'll be like, when I talk about things, and I'm like, I saw this on the internet, so, like, take it with a grain of salt. Like, I feel like until I do the research myself, I'm like, I'm not entirely sure.
I can give you
one of the big ones.
Something.
Did you email the Smithsonian?
No, but I went on Google. Yeah, I went on Google and I like looked it up and I was like, wow, because there's a lot of research that's like, yes, we're in the 6th mass extinction. I was like, wow, okay, that is new information. But like typically what I'll do is I'll see a statistic like that and then I will Google it and use Google Scholar and try to find a bunch of other things and see how many people are talking about it and then evaluate the credibility of the people that I'm able to find.
That's
and
looking
typically
into it.
The biggest thing I do as a debater, one of the biggest things I learned from high school debate was that anything can be proven. Literally any fact that you can possibly imagine, there's evidence for it out there somewhere. It just may or may not be credible, you know? So what I'll normally do when I'm looking at something's credibility is intentionally look up if there's anything that says otherwise. So if I see a scare statistic that's like, 98% of all the life on Earth is dying, I'll try to see if like there's anything that says otherwise and see if that has any like bias to it or any different validity.
The follow-up that I would just have with that, I read this statistic that it's some ridiculous percentage of black Angus cows, which is a lot of the beef that we eat, come from just like, it's a couple of bulls, and that's it. And so they worry about the genetic diversity of those because that involves disease resistance and all kinds of things. And it goes back to what Andy was saying, there's too many chickens. And they're all the same kind of chicken. I know Will's is going to be sports. Maddy, why don't you go next?
Okay.
We're gonna end on sports.
So I'm like jumping between two statistics, but I think I'm gonna go with the one that I was more like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I recently did a research paper on childhood trauma and how it's a risk factor to being involved in criminal behavior and eventually imprisonment, if that's the route that it goes. But one of the statistics that I found was that actually 90% of juvenile offenders have been in contact with childhood trauma before, and I just thought that was like super alarming that
It is.
90% of the people in these institutions have dealt with childhood trauma, and so I'm like, why aren't we doing more to have some interventions for this
Of course.
type of treatment whenever there's such staggering statistics of such a relation between the two things. So that's one that I was just like, whoa, 90%, you're saying that only 10% of people are not dealing with some sort of trauma, and that's why they've ended up there.
And that would argue for like expanded family services and services through the schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember what the statistic was, but it said somewhere that like, it was a staggering statistics, but like there are a lot of kids that don't have access to like therapists or counseling or mental health facilities of any sort. And so I think that's something that really we need to take a look at, because like our youth is the most impressionable generation.
Yes.
So we need to be doing whatever we can to
Right.
be helping their outcomes in life. And I mean, it's not their fault. They're just not innately bad people who are getting involved in criminal behavior.
Horrible things have happened to them previously.
Exactly. So yeah, I thought that was a really alarming statistic, and then it also made me think, why aren't we doing, like, why are we just letting this happen? Like, why aren't we doing anything now that we can see that this like exists? Like, it clearly exists. So that's fine.
I was just wondering, do you know what the proportion was of traumatized kids outside of juvenile detention centers?
That would be
I did look that up, but I didn't remember it before I sat down.
Was it significantly different?
No, I mean, yes and no. Like, it was definitely a lower percentage, not like 90%, but it still was one of those things that I was like,
wow.
Yeah.
Get the kids to some therapy.
Yeah. Or a safe home environment, or have some sort of intervention, you know, because, I don't know, I feel like it's something that you can't just rely on people to be good people and do the right thing, and unfortunately we do need like interventions from bigger organizations to
of course, that's why we have social workers.
Exactly. And so I think there needs to be more checkups and stuff, because
absolutely
it's scary out there.
Will, prove me wrong that you're going to give a sports stat.
No, it is a sports stat.
There we go.
So,
what you got?
These are movies.
Yeah, that's a
Is
little
it a
harder.
sports movies?
No.
It's The Natural.
Oh, that's a movie. Oh gosh. Alright, so no sport probably relies on stats as much as baseball.
Sure.
I mean, baseball is borderline math at times, you know, different things, especially like the different divisions and what. So anyways, one of the things that's widely used is fielding percentage. It's widely considered, you know, if someone's good defensively, they look at fielding percentage, which is basically the amount of balls that are hit to you divided by the amount of outs you make. The opposite way, right? It's the amount of outs you make, the amount of balls that are hit to you. So basically, you're more penalized for being more athletic than if you're less athletic, because they divide that by, you know, it's how many balls are hit to you. For instance,
Do errors figure into this percentage too?
they do.
Okay.
They do. But so, for instance, Derek Jeter is probably one of the greatest shortstops of all time. Top three at least. Has a .976 fielding percentage for his career.
Okay.
Ozzie Smith might be the greatest defensive shortstop of all time. He has about a .978.
Okay.
Marcell Ozuna, who is one of the worst outfielders in baseball, who is part of the reason the Cardinals got beat as bad as they did in the NLCS, has a 979 fielding percentage. He has a higher fielding percentage than arguably the two most athletic, most gifted shortstops of all time, because he is slow and does not get to balls. So he does not have as many balls that are considered to get to him.
Oh, okay.
If that makes any sense. Whereas
Well, actually, almost none of this has made sense because I don't recognize any of those names.
so
And very good. So you're speaking to Ashley and the internet at this point.
I feel like that meme, you know, the math girl, she's just like,
With all the like fingers.
I
yeah.
don't know any of the people he's talking, but he could be talking about like Stuart Kings of England for all I know.
see, okay, I could apply the same for like Omar Vizquel.
Right,
sure-
now him I do know.
Yeah, exactly. See, I'm sure if you looked at it, same thing, because he was a very athletic shortstop.
Sure.
But basically, it's just because they're getting to more balls that the average shortstop wouldn't get to. So they're at it, and because they're getting to balls that they might not, maybe they shouldn't.
So you think this is an invalid statistic?
Oh, absolutely, isn't it
Okay.
valid? Derek Jeter has led the league several times in most errors committed.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you this, just straight up.
Yes.
Who do you feel is both hitting and playing the field the best shortstop of all time?
Oh.
I know, that's a stunner.
That's tough. I mean, it might be like Derek Jeter. I mean, Ozzie Smith didn't have much power, but he's a very good hitter as well. Very good defensively. Technically, Alex Rodriguez, but he ended up playing third base for most of his career. But if he would have stuck to it, probably him, especially with the steroids. That
And
really
Jackie
helps,
Robinson was a shortstop at the beginning of his career too.
Oh, okay. But then that was Pee Wee Reese for the most part.
And Pee Wee Reese, absolutely.
Honus Wagner would be up there too.
Well,
So in the
please,
comments,
yeah.
please explain this
Yeah.
for the rest of us.
So yeah, I know baseball history more than I know current players. So those are the statistics which we found interesting, but we'd like to read about what you found interesting too. So please comment and like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm finally starting to understand all this.
Hey.
And have a great day. Very good. Outstanding. I knew you were going to have a
Was that
fourth one.
Yeah.